Hi there guys, my name is Tom Kendall Fitness, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the top 5 everyday things that are stripping you of your masculinity. So, first things first, I want to get across to you the important concept of how dopamine works in our system. So dopamine is a hormone that is released when your brain is expecting a reward. Now, I want to make the emphasis on the word expecting there. There's a big misconception that dopamine is something that is constantly like being released within your system whilst you're doing an activity that you enjoy. This is not the case. The things that are released whilst doing the activities are things like endorphins and serotonin. Dopamine is all about the kind of build up to that thing, the expectation of getting a reward. So it is released in anticipation of something that you yourself have associated with pleasure. Like, it's natural, but obviously a caveman wouldn't know what a chocolate chip cookie is, but you have associated eating chocolate chip cookies with pleasure. So say when you smell like a freshly baked batch of chocolate chip cookies, that dopamine starts to get released because you start thinking about eating it. So that's a very important concept that we need to understand. It's basically, in like layman's terms, it's the carrot on the stick. So I don't know if you can picture this in your head, but kind of, you know, that thing where the man's like following either like the money's being dangled in front of his face, or the horse of like the carrot being dangled in front of it. Dopamine kind of, it's not a bad thing, but in terms of getting excited about doing something that is like bad for you, it draws you towards doing that thing. It's almost something that you have no control over, which is where discipline comes into play here. So yeah, dopamine is the expectation of pleasure, and the dangerous thing here is that the thing that you are looking forward to, that your brain is telling you you are expecting a reward from, may not actually be bringing you any pleasure. And the reason for this is that we have a baseline level of dopamine, like in our system, in our blood. And when you have a spike in dopamine in anticipation of something that is bad for you, after you've completed that thing that you kind of had the idea that was going to be really good, after you've completed that and you've realized that it was of no benefit to you, the feeling of disappointment causes your dopamine levels to crash below the baseline level. And this is really important. So when you have a spike in dopamine, say if you did something like exercise, where if you look forward to the exercise, you have a spike in dopamine. Once you've completed that exercise, the levels just kind of either return back to normal, or they'll like go up a little bit, so your baseline will return higher. Whereas when you do something that's bad for you, like eat junk food or play like Xbox for ages or something like that, the dopamine levels return to like below baseline. And the issue with this is repeating this cycle over and over again will basically cause your baseline to become so like drastically low that it's almost like irrecoverable. Like, it's really difficult to get that back up to the original baseline that you had. And the effect that creates is that you begin to just not really enjoy anything anymore. And what I've just described there is basically depression stemming from addiction. So it's the addiction of watching porn all the time, or always being on your phone. It's that addiction to the dopamine rush that's caused your dopamine baseline to become so low that you no longer enjoy anything anymore, which is obviously main symptom of depression. There's a big misconception that depression is to do with sadness. Depression is actually where you just struggle to enjoy things that a normal person would enjoy. Now, the scary thing about this, in terms of having a really low level of like baseline dopamine in your system, is that dopamine is not just a hormone that's involved in kind of the expectation of pleasure. It's also involved in organ function, sexual function, memory retention, sleep quality. It's involved in all of these things, so that's why the symptoms of dopamine imbalance include things such as muscle cramps, spasms or stiffness, digestion problems such as like constipation and acid reflux, pneumonia, trouble sleeping, moving or speaking more slowly than usual, feeling tired, unmotivated, sad and lacking hope, having low libido, and even hallucinations. And the crazy thing about this is when I was doing my research about this, all of these symptoms, the muscle spasms, digestion problems, basically all of these, I experienced every single one of these at the same time. Luckily, except for pneumonia, even the hallucinations. My parents will know about this, but like when I was at my worst point, when I would go to sleep and when I'd like turn the lights off, I'd like every other week or so there'd just be a night where I was trying to get to sleep, I couldn't sleep, and I'd start seeing like spiders. Like I think I see a spider, I'd kind of rush out of bed and turn the lights on, because obviously nobody wants to be in bed with a spider, but then there'd be nothing there. So yeah, it can even cause like hallucinations like that. So having low levels of dopamine is not something that you want to be experiencing. But there is a bright side to this. There are things that you can do to slowly begin to return your dopamine levels back to normal, and I will explain that in the following video, which will be released tomorrow. But now let's get into the top 5 everyday things that are crushing your dopamine levels. So number 1, the big one, porn. Now, I want to make 2 like distinctions here. There's masturbation and then there's masturbation with porn. 2 very different things. And this, I'm sure a lot of you young guys out there have heard the term post-nut clarity, but I'm sure you've also heard the term post-nut depression. Now, post-nut clarity was always the one that I used to hear at school. Then over time, this post-nut depression thing has kind of crept in, and obviously there's a big difference between clarity and depression. And the difference that I think between these 2 things is, I'm going to use an example from The Wolf of Wall Street here. If you've seen this, I'm sure a lot of you have. Matthew McConaughey's character asks Leonardo DiCaprio at the beginning of the film, "Do you jerk off?" He says, "You've got to feed the geese to keep the blood flowing. Keep the rhythm below the belt." Now, this is obviously something that Wall Street traders would do, that a lot of them have talked about on podcasts and things like that, and in books and stuff, where because they were dealing with numbers all day, every day, they would have to go and jerk off to release the tension, to release the stress, and that would give them post-nut clarity. But the difference is, this was in the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, where you couldn't just go to the bathroom at wherever you were trading and get porn up on your phone. They were just doing this staring at a wall. Difference now is that lots and lots of young men are jerking off every single day to porn, to videos, to images, wherever they're getting them, of other people having sex. And the issue with this is that these young guys and teenagers are conditioning themselves to basically enjoying watching other people have sex. And the first issue that this can create is that these young men think, like a trick in their brains into thinking that they're having sex with these women that they're seeing. So they're tricking their brains into thinking that they're basically getting a new girl every day. This is going to create like a complete lack of will to actually wanting to go out and try and start a relationship, or try and even just, pick up girls at the club, because your brain already thinks that you do this on a day-to-day basis. And the second issue here is that when these young guys do finally get into relationships, because their brain is so used to having a different girl every single day, they're either going to continue to watch porn and continue extending this problem of crashing their dopamine levels, or they're just not going to be able to sustain a long-term relationship. Now, the way that this links to the post-nut depression is that when you're watching this porn, it's nice whilst you're doing it, and obviously in the expectation of the reward, which is ejaculation. But then the depression comes from after that, when you realise you just wasted the last 5-10 minutes doing something that hasn't benefited you at all. You weren't actually with this attractive woman in the video. The depression comes from, right, now I'm in reality, now the dopamine's coming back down, reducing my baseline. And that is the difference between back in the day when guys would just jerk off to their wall and to now, because it is a natural thing. You see monkeys, chimpanzees, gorillas, that like, they jerk off in the zoo. It's a natural thing. But the addition of the simulation of porn just completely destroys your dopamine levels if you do it very frequently, which probably 90% of young guys do. So yeah, that is the first thing. So second thing is going to be computer games, Xbox games, PlayStation, whatever you play video games on. Now this is basically the same concept as porn. It's a simulation of reality that you're tricking your brain into thinking you're a soldier in Call of Duty, a footballer in FIFA. It's tricking your brain into thinking that you're something that you're not, and that you're achieving rewards in the real world, because your brain can't really distinguish between your brain can't distinguish between the dopamine spike that you get from a computer game and the dopamine spike that you get from going out and actually playing football. But what it can distinguish between is the turning off of the Xbox and the realization that you've just wasted 3 hours causing that big crash in dopamine, and the actually going out, playing football, coming home, being really tired, being really, like, your muscles are aching, but you know that you've just done a few hours of good exercise, which causes those dopamine levels to go up instead of down. Video games are a simulation of reality that are tricking a lot of young kids and a lot of young men into thinking that there's something that they're not, thinking that they have status in these games. Like, I remember when I used to play Call of Duty, everybody used to want to get prestige 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like, the higher the prestige you were, the better player you were. And it's even worse in the new Call of Duties, where there's no prestige anymore and your level resets every season, which I thought was really weird when they did that. I was like, why have they taken prestige out of the game? It's to keep you addicted. It's to keep thinking that you have to keep leveling up so that you have the status in the game. You know, if you want to really if you really want to increase your levels of dopamine, like, and keep them at a good level, keep them going up instead of down, achieve status in the real world, not in video games. So on its own merit, carbohydrates do not have that, like, they don't burn the calories whilst you're eating them. And when sugar is ingested, this causes a massive surge in dopamine that has been shown scientifically to be very similar to the effect that you get when you ingest heroin or cocaine. So basically what this is saying is sugar is highly addictive, and as it doesn't have a very satiating effect, you can just keep eating it and eating it and eating it until you're full. You know, this leads to things like eating disorders, like binge eating, and it's just really bad for you. You know, it's the same concept again. The dopamine levels go up because you're excited to eat the sugary food. You eat the sugary food, you feel really bad about it, dopamine levels crash, they keep going down, you keep gaining weight, you keep losing organ function. It just creates a whole load of health problems that you don't want, especially as a young guy trying to make his way in the world. So number 4 is going to be substance abuse. So drinking lots of alcohol, doing lots of drugs. Now the main thing with alcohol and drugs, and I'm just going to lump it all in as drugs because alcohol is a drug. The reality is that drugs make us feel good. Like, there is something that goes on when you do drugs that makes you feel good. Otherwise, obviously, people would not do them in the first place. However, especially if your life is not going the way that you want it to, you can begin to use drugs as a crutch and think, every day of my life is going to be shit until I get off work at 5 o'clock and can have a drink or smoke some weed and things like that. And one of the things that pisses me off the most is the amount of guys that I hear saying, well, smoking weed is still better for you than smoking cigarettes because it stops you from getting cancer, whereas cigarettes, they give you cancer. Weed, the oils in weed do have, you know, cancer reversing effects. The oil in weed, smoking anything, whether it's a vape, weed or cigarettes, is inflaming your lungs and creating a higher risk of getting lung cancer. Someone who smokes weed is just as likely to get lung cancer as somebody who smokes cigarettes. The only difference is cigarettes are cheaper and they can smoke more of them more quickly. So yeah, substance abuse is the same thing. You get excited about doing the drugs, you do the drugs, they don't make you that happy, dopamine crashes, and the levels keep going down. Same as the last three things. The biggest one today though, number 5, is social media. And this is the worst one, because everybody has a phone on them these days. They have done for 25 years now. But now you can pull your phone out of your pocket, you can watch a movie, you can watch a TV episode, you can go on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat. There's so many different things that you can do on your phone these days that give you that dopamine surge, that give you, you know, all these apps are designed to be addictive, to be designed to make you think, oh, I want to go on Instagram now, and it starts to make you feel good. But it's the same thing. How many times have you been sat on the toilet, you know, even if you're someone like me who's gone completely cold turkey on all this stuff, how many times have you found yourself on the toilet just flicking through something on your phone, like mindlessly for like 10 minutes? It happens because these apps are designed to be addictive. And it's the same thing. You when you come out of that like trance of just like staring at your phone, you realise how much time you've just wasted. And again, the dopamine levels crash and they keep going down. So I've basically just given you the top 5 things that you might be doing every day. They're kind of stripping you of your masculinity, causing your dopamine balances to be so low that you've got reduced sexual function, reduced organ function. All of this is linked to testosterone as well, especially sugary food. The insulin spike that is caused when eating loads of sugar causes your tests to go down. These are all things that can cause your levels of testosterone to drop drastically, that we don't want to be doing. And the only bit of advice that I can give you for every single one of these things is to go cold turkey. Stop doing all of them. I don't want any of these copes, excuses. Oh, I'll play 1 hour of video games a day. I'll have one cheat thing every day. No, 0. The only way that you're going to be able to get over these addictions, because they're all addictions, you know, drugs and alcohol are not the only things that you can become addicted to. All of these are addictions, they're all a problem in society today. We need to stop doing these things to return our hormone balances back to normal, so that we can just start getting on with things, so that we can just start dealing with life the way that it's meant to be dealt with good levels of testosterone, good levels of dopamine, and just overall feeling content and feeling satisfied with every day. What I'm trying to do here is just make sure as many young men as possible are getting this information and are just going to sleep at night content that they've had a good day, that they've completed everything they wanted to do in that day, that they're ready to continue the next day. This has been Tom Kendall Fitness. If you like this video and you think it could help somebody, please share it to them, please like, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.